It had been months since I'd seen them, since I was even allowed to speak to them. I was sick, bedridden with something that no doctor could seem to explain. I thought I'd be surrounded by my family, but instead, I watched them pull away. Slowly at first. Then it became obvious. They chose her over me. Her, Sarah, my sister. The one I always protected. The one I thought I could trust. I thought I could count on them, but somehow, when I needed them the most, they weren't there. They picked Sarah, their healthy daughter, the one who didn't have the constant doctor's visits, the one who didn't need the endless pills and injections. But what hurt the most wasn't just their silence. It was the way they turned to her for everything. They didn't even realize how much it crushed me. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. I was always the dependable one, the one who had my life together. Or at least, that's how I saw it. But things started shifting when I got sick. At first, my parents were worried, of course. They stayed by my side, bringing me flowers, encouraging me. But as the months passed, Sarah began stepping in. She started taking the place of the perfect daughter. The daughter who could hold the family together, who could make things feel normal. I'm Emily, by the way. I'm 17. My sister, Sarah, is 15. She's 2 years younger than me, but in the past few months, I began to feel like I didn't even exist anymore. The hardest part? Watching them praise her, watch her get all the love and attention I used to receive. I'm lying in bed, stuck in this cage of my own body, while Sarah is at family events, getting all the compliments, all the hugs, the love. From my family. And it's not like she's asked for this. She never did. But it didn't matter. It still hurt. But everything changed that day I stood in front of my front door, ready to leave the hospital after months of being isolated. I was finally healthy enough. I thought about what I'd say to them, what I'd do when I walked in. Could I confront them? Could I tell them how they made me feel? Or was it too late? I took a deep breath and opened the door. Little did I know, this would be the moment they'd never forget. When I stepped into that living room, everything changed. The house that used to feel like home suddenly felt so foreign. The silence hit me first, thick, awkward, like the air was too heavy to breathe. And then, there they were, staring at me. Sarah, my little sister, who had replaced me in so many ways, was sitting there on the couch, her face frozen. Mom and Dad looked like they had seen a ghost. And they did. They saw me, but it was almost like they didn't recognize me. I didn't even know how to feel in that moment. Part of me wanted to scream, to say everything I'd been holding back for months. But I just stood there, unsure of what would come next. As they tried to regain their composure, I couldn't ignore the way they all looked at me. Guilty, surprised, like I was the one who had been absent all this time. Sarah, my sister, looked the most uncomfortable. She probably never asked for this. I could tell she felt torn between wanting to be the perfect daughter they seemed to crave and realizing that what was happening between us was wrong. It wasn't her fault, but it didn't stop the hurt. Mom was the first to speak, her voice shaking. "Emily, sweetheart, you look better," she said, trying to sound normal, trying to act like nothing had changed. But I could hear the hesitation in her voice. The truth was, things weren't the same. Things would never be the same. "You look good," Dad added, but his words didn't have the warmth they once did. It was like they were telling themselves what they wanted to hear, not what was really happening. But that was the problem, wasn't it? They never saw what was happening. They never saw how Sarah had become the shining star in our family, while I faded into the background. The months I spent sick in that room, it was as if they had just moved on without me. I wanted to tell them how they had ignored me, how they had let Sarah fill the space I used to occupy. I wanted to scream, to make them understand how much I had been hurt, how much I had suffered in silence. But when I opened my mouth, what came out wasn't what I expected. Instead of anger, something softer, quieter, slipped past my lips. You don't even know, do you? The room went deathly silent. What happened next was something I wasn't ready for. The silence felt unbearable. It was like the world was holding its breath. My words hung in the air. You don't even know, do you? And for the first time in months, the tension between us felt like it could finally explode. But no one moved. No one spoke. They just stared at me, unsure how to react. Sarah shifted uncomfortably on the couch, glancing between me and our parents, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. But this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me. I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to explode, to let out everything I'd been holding back, but instead, my voice came out shaky, almost quiet. I was sick. I get it. You had to pick someone to take care of things. But do you know how it felt to be replaced? How it felt to watch Sarah get everything I used to have? Mom's face softened, and I could tell she felt the weight of my words. She opened her mouth to say something, but Sarah jumped in before she could speak. It's not like that, Emily, Sarah said, her voice fragile. I didn't ask for this. I never wanted things to change. Her words stung. I didn't want to blame her, but I couldn't deny the hurt I felt. She didn't ask for it, but it was happening nonetheless. And it wasn't just her. My parents had let it happen. I never got to choose, I said, my voice steadying as I looked at Mom and Dad. You chose Sarah, and you didn't even notice I was fading away. Mom's face fell, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she looked truly guilty. But it wasn't just guilt, it was the realization that something had gone terribly wrong. Something had shifted in our family that could never be undone without effort. Dad remained quiet, his eyes avoiding mine. He wasn't ready to admit it, but the truth was there. He hadn't been there for me when I needed him the most. Not the way he had always promised he would be. I felt the weight of their eyes on me, but the pain was too much to ignore. I've been trying to forgive you, I whispered. But how can I, when you never even saw me? My words hung in the air, like a challenge they had no idea how to face. For the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. A mix of anger, hurt, and a strange sense of empowerment. But just as I thought I might finally hear an apology, Dad opened his mouth. And what came next hit me harder than anything I'd ever imagined. Those words. The words I never thought I would hear. After everything, the months of feeling invisible, the endless nights spent wishing for their attention, they were finally admitting it. But it wasn't enough to hear those words. Not yet. I needed to understand what had happened. Why did they choose Sarah? Why did they let me fade into the background without even noticing? Mom reached out, her hand trembling as she touched my arm. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she said softly. "We were just overwhelmed. Your illness, it took everything out of us, and we didn't realize what was happening to you. We didn't see how much you were suffering. We just—" She choked on her words, unable to finish. I could feel the weight of their guilt, but it wasn't the only thing filling the room. There was also something else, something much deeper. Regret. They had taken so long to recognize the hurt they'd caused, and now they couldn't undo the damage. I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive them completely, but it was a start. The room was still and heavy, the silence stretching out between us. I could feel my anger slowly subsiding, replaced by a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was fighting for their attention. They saw me. They finally saw me. I looked at Sarah, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw her pain too. She wasn't just the chosen one. She was a scared little girl who had been forced into a role she didn't ask for. I had blamed her, but now I could see how lost she had been too. "I'm angry," I whispered, my voice shaking as the truth came tumbling out. "I'm angry because I needed you. I needed you, and you were just gone." Tears filled my eyes, but I wasn't crying for the past. I was crying for the future, one that I hoped might still hold a chance for healing. The apology wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real. And it gave me something I hadn't had for so long: hope. My parents promised they would do better, that they would make an effort to see me, to see us as equals, not replacements. But the consequences were still unfolding. It wasn't just about the apology. It was about what came next. Our family had a long road ahead of us. There would be more hard conversations, more awkward moments, and the lingering bitterness of the past would never just disappear. But I didn't need things to be perfect. I just needed them to try. Sarah and I would never be the same. But as we sat down together later that night, talking like we used to, something inside me shifted. We didn't have to be rivals. We didn't have to fight for attention anymore. As I stood up to leave the room, I realized something. I wasn't just Emily, the sick daughter, anymore. I was Emily, the daughter who fought for her voice, who stood up for herself and for the family she had been fighting to be seen by. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole again.